Just to introduce our group here who've been able to make it back for this event, to my far right, John Criss was from Wichita Southeast. He was a 5'10 junior on that 1964-65 team. Tommy Newman was a 6'4 sophomore from Fort Worth, Texas. Tommy redshirted that year due to knee surgery. Dave Stallworth, 6'7 senior from Dallas, Texas, two-time first-team All-American, and just honestly the greatest player to ever wear a Wichita State uniform, no question about it. Another of the all-time greats and a Shocker Hall of Famer, Muhammad Sharif, who, as Kelly Pete at the time, was a 6'1 junior from Wichita East High School, and Bob Powers, a 6'8 sophomore that year from Washington, Pennsylvania. So please welcome back the 64-65 Shockers. To lead us in a little bit, just to kind of get you a little history of that team, Jim Kobe from Channel 3 a short time ago did a little piece on that 64-65 team. We're going to show that to you as kind of a lead-in so you can watch the video screens. Let's maybe start with the fact. First of all, Garrett and this current team just captured the 7th regular season Missouri Valley Conference title in Wichita State history. These guys were involved with the first two, 63-64 and 64-65. And following that 64 season, Ralph Bellamy, your head coach, left for Iowa. Gary Johnson was a longtime assistant, became the new head coach. And how were they maybe the same as far as style and so forth? How were they different? Anybody?
Well, I don't think they were any different, you know, because Gary was a freshman coach at the time, you know. During that time, you know, there could only be two teams, you know, a freshman team and a varsity team. And Gary and Ralph, they got them together, you know, pretty much the same.
Not much difference in personality or the way they handled the team, John?
I would like to speak to that. It's evident Dave has forgotten. We used to call Ralph the Ripper because he'd just soon rip you as look at you, okay? And Gary was what I would call a player's coach. He was kind of, to the people on the team, he was kind of a father. If you had a problem, you went to him, and Ralph never knew about it. But philosophically, they were the same type of basketball coaches, different personalities. And Ralph's classic was to get and go like this. Remember Dave? I remember him reaching up to Dave and saying, "You think you're so cute," you know, and that's a two-time All-American, okay? So I just want to set the record straight. His memory's not very good, but I would also like to thank Dave because of my opportunity to play with Dave has gotten me where I'm at today. It's not much, but I played with a two-time All-American. He shared the ball with the rest of us and made us all good, okay? And I told somebody the other day, the 5 people that played in the Final Four were not great players. Certainly we were good players. We all had our abilities. We played together well. But this man made us all, and he made the university. And for the record, Kelly Pete was guarding Bill Bradley, if anybody asks. And I just don't know how many stories we're supposed to tell, so I won't go any further than that. But it's great to have for y'all to have us back, and I appreciate it. But from my heart, I want to thank Dave and the people I played with. It was a lifetime goal or ambition of mine to play college basketball and go to the Final Four. And again, if it hadn't been for Dave and the teammates, I'd have never gotten there. So thank you, Dave. I appreciate it publicly. Okay. All right.
Of course, the 64-65 team is the one that got to the Final Four, but we had a lot of situations in those years where guys had come in at the middle of a year, and the way eligibility rules were then, that meant you ran out of eligibility at the middle of a year. The year before, in 64, Leonard Kelly and Ernie Moore each had 1 semester of eligibility. So Leonard played the first semester, Ernie played the second semester. They won the Valley title, went to the NCAA, lost in the regional final to K-State here in their own building. But under the rules then, a 5th-year player, which Ernie was, couldn't play in the tournament. And I'm sure that most of you feel that had Ernie and or Leonard or both been able to play that year, that would have been the first Final Four team here.
Yeah, no question, in my opinion. Thanks a lot, John, for setting the record straight. Well, you got off real fast. You're a real fast guy. You know, I had to challenge this guy all through from the 9th grade up to, and I heard about him, you know, John Chris, oh, he's a great shooter, and this guy, man, and I met him, and he was. But you're right. I really do think, and also I would like to also make another record straight. Leonard Kelly was one great basketball player, incredible basketball player. I learned so much from him and also Ernie, and I did have an opportunity to play tandem with both of those guys, which really gave me an opportunity to learn both positions, the one position and the two position. They were probably two of the greatest, a great tandem that I saw coming up, you know, and as a high school, and then have the opportunity to play with them. I do think that year we probably had a more experienced team and much more balanced. We probably had the best team in the country at that time. I do agree.
And I agree with Kelly.
Yeah.
That probably should have been the year that we won it all.
Yeah, we should have won it all that year, actually. We had the best balance. We had Nate, who was as strong as an ox, in the center, and Dave, of course. So I really think that year was a better team overall, if I'm not.
And we played the regional finals were in Wichita against
K-State, right?
Right, yeah, and the finals were in Kansas City that year, so it was a natural. I mean, I don't think we overlooked the game. We just played poorly that night.
Well, yeah, but we played poorly. I think we were looking past K-State, actually, is what we were doing. I think that was what happened.
John, you already touched on this, but Dave to this day holds the record for scoring average here at over 24 points a game for his career, but he's also 4th in assists, and that was the thing that if anybody that saw Dave play remembers that he could have averaged 30, 35 a game, but he was extremely unselfish.
Well, to me, he was the best all-around basketball player in the country, and he did give the ball up. He didn't hog the ball. I mean, you know, a lot of those guys that scored 40 points a game shot it every time they touched it. The rest of them just took it out of bounds and threw it to him. But he played to win and was a super all-around player, and he made us all good. If you're going to play with Dave, you had to keep up. And as you know, he went 150 miles an hour for 40 minutes. And it was, again, Dave, you were the greatest. And I'm not saying that to gain anything. You all know he was. And it was just a pleasure to play. But he did. I mean, he did whatever the game took to get it done. I know Kelly's been there. I've seen him throw up before the game and go out there and score 45 points. You know, I'd have the flu and stay home, but he'd go play basketball. So that's why he's 2-time All-American.
Yeah, he was a great basketball, probably one of the best mid-range basketball players I have ever seen when it comes to a mid-range game within 20 feet, either side of the court, left and right hand. That's another thing that a lot of players cannot do today, is play on either side and left and right hand. Dave was very effective, and he had every shot. That was one thing that made him so very difficult. I remember, if anyone was around at the time when Ralph was around, Ralph had a way of doing things and smiling at you, and when he really wanted something from you. And I can remember the first time that he gave me my responsibility as a freshman is, you know, you're going to have to follow him around. and that's how I learned how to play defense, was running around following Dave Stallworth. Yeah, he was a great basketball player.
No, I really had a good time, though. I had a good time playing with Sharif, and the rest of the guys. Really, you know, I had a really good time. You know, I mean, it wasn't one of those things where I would just go out and just want to play. I enjoyed the game. I enjoyed playing with the guys. I've enjoyed the game as a game. It's a team sport. It's 5 people out there. You're talking about 10 people out there. We're talking about 5-on-5. And we get out there and we just played together as a team, you know, and this is how we won, as a team. You know, it wasn't an individual or anything like that. It was just a team.
You know, Dave, having said that, the late Ron Heller, who was one of the coaches on that team, told me one time that Dave always played 100%, whether it was practice, a pickup game, whatever it was, because he loved the game so much. He would rather be on the basketball court doing that than anything else he could possibly be doing, and so he gave it everything he had all the time when he had a basketball in his hands.
I enjoyed it.
Dave was from Dallas, Texas, and I was a couple of years behind him, and when I got here, I had never seen anyone that Dave's size able to play out on the floor like he played. Today, you have a lot of players at 6'7", 6'8", that can play the guard position, can play the forward position. They have a term today that they coined, it's called a point forward. Well, Dave was the original point forward in terms of being able to handle the ball, and that's why he's such a great all-around player. He was elected one of the top, or selected as one of the top 5 players to ever come out of the state of Texas. And Texas has produced a number of great players, including Shaquille O'Neal and a number of others. So he was inducted into the Texas High School Hall of Fame in the late 70s or early 80s. I can't remember exactly when. So we were very fortunate, as John said, to be able to play with one of the all-time greats.
Yeah, something occurred to me, and it's not on the sheet of questions I gave you guys to be ready for, but it has occurred to me that all of you are intelligent men who have gone on and done well in your professional careers. Tommy and John were both coaches during their post-college careers, but it strikes me that it was also a very smart team, basketball smart, and guys that really understood the game and knew how to play it. And I wondered if you guys would comment on that a little bit.
I'll address that. The group that went to the Final Four, I think I heard on the video, were all local area high school people. And if you were choosing a pickup team, you wouldn't pick 3 guys that run real slow and can't jump. Vern Smith, Dave Leach, and Jamie, okay? And they were good basketball players, don't misunderstand me. And a 5'10" guy don't turn around many programs, okay? And Kelly Pete was probably the only one, or Mohammed was the only one that should have been playing that night, physically, okay? The rest of us were good spot shooters, and we had our abilities. But Mike is correct. I think we all knew each other's moves. We knew if Kelly's here, he's going there, and Vern's going here, and Dave will be back there. And we counted on each other. And that's basically why we got to where we got that year, is because we were, and again, basketball smart. I told someone the other night we beat Hank Iba in his own slowdown game. I think they thought we were probably going to run the ball because the night before we scored in the high 80s against SMU, and then we come out and beat them 54-48, and he was a legend. And I think they were kind of taken by surprise that, oh, they're going to do this, well, we can do this better than they can. And all of a sudden the game's over and we won. And we only took 29 shots that night, I think. Usually Kelly took more than that himself, but he never passed the ball back. But, and he's right. We played against each other all the way from 7th grade clear through high school, and then we ended up being teammates. The same thing with Jamie. But my point is, we were a cohesive unit, probably the best cohesive unit we had, because we knew each other's what we would do, where we'd be at, what would happen. If I did this, that's going to happen here, and basically that's what got us to the Final Four. When we got there, we didn't play very well, and I think we were outmanned probably, but neither here nor there. But
speaking of smart, I think Ralph was probably the smartest one of all, simply because, well, for a lot of reasons, but also because he scheduled 6 Valley games, conference games, before Dave and Nate's eligibility was up. And 4 of those 6 were on the road, and they were at Bradley and at Drake and at Cincy and all those tough games we had with our All-American. And so we had a home schedule, top-heavy, the last half of the season, and certainly that was due to Ralph's negotiating ability.
You know, that you guys all knew that Dave was going to be running out of eligibility at the end of the first semester, but Nate's departure from the team was a surprise. That takes away a 6'10" guy, another 12 points, 8 rebounds, a future NBA player. So talk a little bit about adjusting to all of that. Just first of all, the kind of the psychological shock, and then guys stepping up and assuming bigger and different roles.
Well, of course, I like to kind of put that in the context as well. When you think about losing Dave Stallworth, #1, two-time All-American, and Nate Bowman, which, to give you context, 6'11", strong, later on went to the NBA and also was one very good matchup for the one and only Wilt Chamberlain. I noticed when they would play Dave, when he played with New York, they would match him up with Nate with Wilt Chamberlain. So to give you context of not only we lost two powerful parts of our team, but the quality of these two individuals, not only physically but emotionally and mentally as well. But we did have one thing: we were fundamentally sound, and we had good coaching, and the adjustments, we made very good adjustments to our opponents, whoever we played against. We were able to make adjustments. We were able to, and also at the time there was one factor, because there was not a clock in that day, we had the ability to control the game, and also we were taught very good team defense. So we were able to score a lot of points in transition and keep the ball on our end of the court a lot of times and score a lot of points, easy points, because we did not have the ability to offensively rebound, so we had to shoot very, very well. And sometimes we shot in the 60s, sometimes we shot even in the 70s some games. But we had to always shoot at least 50% to win. And we basically had great shooters. I had the privilege of playing with 4 great shooters. Everyone on that team. John was a great shooter, 50% shooter. Jamie was over 50% shooter. Dave Leach was over 50%, and Vern Smith also was a 50% shooter. So if we had the ability to get the ball, and because we did not have a clock, and I could basically control the ball well enough to get it to them in their sweet spots when they could shoot, we knew we had a great opportunity to win, and that's how we won most of our games, because basically we had great shooters, and they took good shot selection, was very unselfish, and we were able to, because once that ball goes through the hoop, there's no rebound.
Bob, you've been quiet over there. I want to ask you about the fact that, you know, back then, coaches really didn't play as deep into their bench a lot of minutes a game as they do now. So usually the 5 guys would play most of the minutes, sometimes another guy or 2. But guys like Jamie that stepped up, and Melvin Reed, who went on to become a very fine player as a junior and a senior, that became kind of the 6th man after those guys left. Talk about the level of intensity in practice and the competition in practice that had those guys ready to play, even though maybe they hadn't played that many minutes up till then.
Well, I happen to be a practice warrior, and being a practice warrior, I got a lot of good information from that starting 5 physically. Gary told me early on, he said, "Bob, you're not going to get a lot of playing time, but we need you in that practice every day to make these guys work." And so I saw that as my role on a day-to-day basis, and I took it seriously. I remember having a lot of good, nice contact with them. And I think, you know, I remember that double high post which they don't run anymore. And Nate would be up there. You're not allowed to do this anymore, but he'd be up at the high post with his elbows out like this. And when good guy here would come around the corner, Nate would stick his elbow out about chin high so that I couldn't go around and get him. And so I spent a lot of time getting hit in the head with those elbows. That's probably what's wrong with me today.
John, you kind of mentioned this already, and your memory's incredible. The Shockers in the regional title game against Oklahoma State beat the legendary Hank Ibe and his team at their own game. They took 29 shots, shot 59%, and just controlled the game throughout. And anybody that ever saw an Ibe team, to beat them at their own game was something exceptional. It has to be a special memory for all you guys.
I think Bob hit on the subject, which I kind of led to a minute ago, which leads to what you're speaking about, is that we all knew our role. We all had certain roles to play, and we knew our role whether we had Dave with us and Nate or whether it was just the other 5 of us. We knew what our roles and responsibility were, and we went to a different offense after we lost Nate. I don't know if you guys remember, it was called a spread offense. It was basically 9th grade basketball. I mean, we had 2 guards out front in the high post and 2 forwards, and we hit the post and split, and the other guys came out, and we just kept running this over and over and over till we got a layup. That's why we shot 60% or whatever it was, but we all knew our roles. We all fulfilled our jobs, whether you were a practice warrior or the starting 5. You knew what your role was, you did your job, and you didn't get out of doing your job. And that's one thing that made us good. We all took our responsibility, our roles and our responsibility to heart, and did them the best of our ability. And again, it was a pleasure for me to beat Hank Ibe at his own game. I mean, I was kind of a little bit ornery when I was young, and I kind of wanted to go over and say nice job or something. You know, really upset him, but I didn't want to do that. But,
a little ornery?
Oh, just a little ornery, okay. But it was a pleasure, but I think Bob's right. Everybody knew the role, and we did our own jobs. We didn't try to do too much. We knew our limitations. Ralph made you aware of your limitations, and so did Gary. And while we're on that subject, I just want to say, to me, the coaches were so far advanced. Ralph was way ahead of his time. Whether you played for Ralph or you were an assistant with Ralph, whatever, he was doing things in the 60s, and Gary Thompson was too, that people aren't even doing today. Some of these coaches come up with these defenses and they say, oh, so-and-so at Maryland's doing this. You know what? Ralph was doing it 50 years ago, okay? And that's why he was successful. That's why Gary was successful. That's why Wichita State was successful. We used to do a thing called change-ups. Every time we scored, if you guys remember, we went to a full-court zone press. That was our key. We made a point, whether it's a free throw or a field goal, zone press back to the zone defense. If we missed, you pick up the man guarding you, and you went full court man-to-man. That's it. No questions asked. You didn't have to have a pregame speech. You knew what you were going to do. People don't do that today, and if they do, they think, oh, this guy's a wonderful coach. Look what he's doing. Ralph and Gary were doing it 50 years ago. I mean, that's why we were successful. We knew our roles, we knew our responsibilities, and we ran the fast break. Nobody runs a made free throw fast break. Y'all remember how we ran that. Nobody does that to this day. I want to go over and tell Bill Self at KU, I can show you something that'll make your team better, okay? But it probably upset him, but not that I would care, but it'd just be amazing. I mean, it was a plan. Ralph was pressure basketball, so was Gary and everybody that worked for him. On offense and defense, you put the pressure on the other team. They may make a mistake the first minute or the last minute, but you'll win by 2. Is that not his philosophy? That was it. So, go ahead, Kelly. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, no, just only, I think 100% of what you said was right, but there's one record straight thing that I want to straighten out. And it's all in fun, and I wanted to say this based upon losing to Michigan. Was that Michigan State when we lost? Michigan, yeah. With Kansas Russell the last second. This was kind of interesting. Dave and I was talking about this, what happened in halftime, and during that same series of how we would switch up and do man-to-man and zone and whatever. Halftime, this is the only mistake I think Ralph made was the first half of that game, we played that system, and I was basically man-to-man with Cassie Russell. And halftime, Ralph took me off of Cassie, and Dave told Ralph, said, "No, Ralph, don't do that, man. Leave him on him." You remember that? Mm-hmm. Dave said that at halftime. And then we changed up and went to zone, and Cassie killed us in the second half. He got hot. He was a great shooter. He wasn't a great dribbler, but he could shoot. Once he got hot, it was very difficult to stop him. And he stepped across the timeline and shot it, and that was the game. But that was the one time that I think if we'd stayed man-to-man, I think we could have controlled the rest of that game.
I think that game also had a great national focus as well, because I believe we were number 1 in the country going into that game, and they were number 2.
They were number 2, yeah.
And I'll contend to this day, I watched it on TV, that Dave got forced out of bounds right before Cassie got a chance to shoot that shot.
That's what I recall about the game. Was a bad call at the end. Dave should have had 2 free throws, and they gave him 1. And then I don't know, there was 3 or 4 seconds left, and they threw it up to half court and called timeout, and Cassie made I remember going like this, and it was swish from about half court. And then I walked across the press tables to get off the floor because everybody went on the floor.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
I learned something there because the last words I asked was what defense we're in, and the coach thought for a while and said zone, and it should have been a zone. I don't question that, but I should have put pressure on Cassie to get the ball with his back to the basket or something. Instead, they just threw it in and walked it up, and he took a shot.
Yeah,
dumb me, but that's you learn
to come back. Yeah.
What I could understand was, Is 2 seconds different than 20 years ago than they are now? I just asked you that. All right. Cassie passed through. Cassie threw the ball in. He threw the ball in. They took a couple of dribbles. They passed it back to Cassie. And he dribbled all the way down to maybe mid-court, and he shot, and he made the basket. He beat us by 1. All right.
Let me ask you this. Y'all were teammates with the Knicks. Did y'all ever discuss that?
Yeah. We did.
And what was his answer?
Well, he said, well, we got away with it. And they did what they did, because it takes more than, it doesn't take but 4 seconds to do what he did, I mean, this guy passed the ball, got the ball back, took a couple of dribbles, and shot the ball. All this was done in 4 seconds, and I couldn't understand that. I mean, to this day, I cannot understand that.
Happens in every era, doesn't it?
Sounds familiar.
Well, let me, I know that you guys could listen to these guys forever. Some of you have to get to work. So the last thing I want to ask all of you is just to put it, if you can put in perspective that still, that's the only Final Four team in the history of this program. And I know all or a lot of you still follow this program or reconnected with the program in some cases. And just your thoughts on that, and maybe if you have anything to say to today's Shocker fans and the representatives of the team that are here. So I'll let you guys go with that.
Well, I'd like to say I've had the opportunity to watch our great Shocker team today, and I'm very, very impressed with what I see. These guys, I believe they not only have a chance to go to the Final Four, they have the one thing that we did not do. They have a chance to win. They have the opportunity to win. So I think if you guys work together as a unit, and you have been doing that, you believe in yourself, share the ball, don't be selfish, be resilient, don't let down like you've been doing, play a half a game, you must play the complete game, don't play to lose, play to win. You guys sometimes play to lose. You're playing not to lose. You have to play to win, and that's the key. And but I'm very impressed with what I see, and I wish you guys a lot of luck. You're standing on some tall shoulders. All these great guys here, the guys that we learned from, and we're so proud of you. And keep the tradition going, and we'll be rooting for you. That's all I want to say.
I'd like to say, excuse me, a couple things to the guys on the team today. When I watched that last game, I'm coming off of 3 weeks of pneumonia, so I watched a lot of basketball. I watched every game on every channel, and I split screens in the whole thing. So when I watched the end of that game, and I saw how you guys responded, which is the normal response by every team, I felt total pain in my heart. Not because you lost. That had nothing to do with my pain. It had to do with how hard you guys worked. And we know how hard you have to work to get to that station in the tournament. That's what really hurt me, is knowing what you lost inside, not the final score. I believe you guys played as well as you could possibly play. In 1984, a guy named Tom Peters wrote a book called In Search of Excellence. And it was a book concerning some of the best-run corporations in the United States. And he did a lot of research to figure out what made corporations successful. And he found a study on Nobel Prize winners, Nobel Prize research winners. These are the guys that drop out of life and go churn up the pig brains and do whatever you have to do to get the serum or whatever it is. So they're gone for 10 or 20 years, and then all of a sudden they come out and get voted, and everybody in the world knows who they are. And nobody knew a thing about them before they won the Nobel Prize. They did a study to try to figure out what is it inside these Nobel Prize winners, and not just the winners, but all the guys that compete in the Nobel Prize. What is it that makes them successful? These were everyday, ordinary men. Everyday, ordinary. Like Jimmy Valvano said, Lord must have loved ordinary people because he made so many of them. But what they found out was the research showed that there were 4 characteristics in these guys. One of them was a streak of brutality. Now, we're not talking about athletes here. We're talking about common, everyday nerds. There's probably a lot of you out there, so you know what I'm talking about. Streak of brutality, strong finishers, and I'll get the other two. My age is killing me. Streak of brutality, strong finishers, killer instinct, and I can't remember the other one. But those 3 characteristics were found in these Nobel Prize winners. And as I thought about you guys, and I think you have all these instincts. And I think you have a coach that I probably couldn't play for because I know what a taskmaster he is. I know you guys go through hell every day, and you're to be congratulated for being out there. Win or lose, it doesn't make any difference. You're giving this school your blood. And I can remember that, and so can these guys. So we want to commend you for that.
Do we want to take a few questions? Anybody have a question? Yes, Devon.
I do. A lot of people talk about, and I just want to see if this is true, that John Wooden actually took Coach Miller's zone press. And obviously, we won 10 championships in 12 years, but that was kind of the key one time that they played here, I think, and they got a pretty good beat. We kind of took that, and I just wanted to know if that was legend or if that's true.
I could probably address that better than most people because we had worked nights after practice attacking their zone press. And my job was to take the ball out of bounds. And the minute they scored, I jumped out of bounds with the ball. And all of a sudden, there's 15 UCLA players all over. I'm like, who's on my side? And I threw the ball to a lady 4 rows up, okay? They took the zone press and perfected it, to be honest with you. I think anybody that played against it would say that. And a lot of it's physical skills, but a lot of it as a cohesive unit, and they knew where they were at. But I think he took a lot of Ralph's philosophy, if that's, you know, they tend to sometimes to do a little different zone press of 1-2-1-1 because they had Lou Alcindor and Bill Walton back in the hole. But yes, they took a lot of that same philosophy, I feel like, from Ralph. I don't know about the rest of the people, but yeah.
Well, Dave Leach, who was on this team and who coached with Ralph for a long time, told me the story that that Ralph and John had gotten together at an ABC convention, National Association of Basketball Coaches Convention, and John was asking Ralph a lot of questions about his zone press, change-up defenses, and things like that. And of course, that was a hallmark of all those UCLA championship teams.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would just make a comment, listening to Nate, listening to Dave, and not going to the Final Four. I'm reminded of Oscar Robertson, who never went to the Final Four, and then after he left, I think they won the Final Four at least twice, maybe 3 times. So you had a great team.
There was another common denominator from our team to this team that the Shockers have today, and that is there was a pipeline from Texas to Wichita at that time. There was 4 players on this team in 1965 that was from Texas, all from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Melvin Reed, myself, Dave, and Nate. And of course, Torrey Murray and the kid from Kimball, David Kiles, are from the Dallas area. And so, you know, there's another similarity.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask Dave Stoller who he thought the best player he ever played against.
Pardon?
Best player you ever played against?
Oh, Oscar would be the best player I've ever played against. You know, Oscar was Oscar. You know, he was tough. I mean, he was tough. I mean, he was 6'5". He could go inside, outside. You know, and he played both ends of the court. You know, he was tough. He was tough. I never played against Bird. I never played against a lot of the guys that I never played against a guy from Bradley. You know, I never played against him. You know, but Oscar, I played against him in the pros, and Oscar was tough. Oscar was tough.
I got a question for you. Remember when we go to Louisville and Unsold would pin those balls against the backboard on the rebound, turn around in midair, and outlet pass it all the way down the court before he hit the ground.
Yeah, I had the greatest opportunity to play with Wesley. You know, Wesley could do that. He could get the ball, he could pin it, get it down in the air, and make it, and he could flick it like that, and he could throw the ball half the court like that, 3/4 of the court down. You know, he just do that and just flick it. You know, and it's there. You know, and it's not one of those lazy passes, one of those stiff passes. You know, he would just do it. You know, and that's what made him tough. You know, he could get rid of the ball quicker than any center that ever played the game. He'd get rid of the basketball.
I have a question for Dave, too. I'd like for you to do a little comparison between Ralph Miller and Red Holzman. Red was his coach with the Knicks, and Red won the NBA championship.
Red was my coach, but he never really coached me. Ralph coached me. Now, the things Ralph was doing was revolutionary. You know, Ralph was doing things that other teams weren't doing. You know, I mean, he would ask the players to do things that coaches wouldn't ask other players to do. You know, and Ralph was good at that. You know, now we down 7 points. And it's less than a minute to play. And in no 3 seconds, we're not talking about 3-point shots. And a man coming to you and asks you, we got him what we want him. You know, but this is what he said. This is what he said.
We got him right where we want him.
We got him right where we want him. And we were 7 down with less than a minute to play. And playing against the #1 team in the country, we beat them.
We beat them.
The real fools were ourselves. We believed them.
Yeah.
And went out and won the game. But,
That was the thing that blew me away, you know, is the fact that we came back and we really actually beat this team. He said, don't worry, we got what we want. I said, yeah, okay. You know, but the man, he could, he would do it. He was a coach. He would do it. I mean, Ralph came up with all kinds of lines like that, you know. I mean, he telling you to do something that you know you can't do, what you felt you couldn't do. But when you went out and tried it, you did it. You know.
Those 40-something points you scored that night didn't hurt it. I can tell you.
Well, that was another game. You know. But I don't think it was the best game that I played, but it was one of the top teams, top plays that I made was against. Louisville, I guess, you know.
Yeah, he had 40 in his last game, that 65 season against Louisville. Anybody that was there was the darndest assortment of shots from one player I ever saw in my life.
But you know, but really though, I had some teammates. I had really good teammates, you know. And I didn't have to hog the ball. I didn't have to hog every shot. I didn't need to. They got to play down there in the roundhouse, now they call it Leach's Alley. And I mean, the man didn't miss from over there. I mean, he shot the ball. If he shot the ball 10 times, 9 of them would be good from Leach's Alley. And that's the way he shot it, you know. Kelly, we need a steal. He was steal. John, we need a shot. Shot. Got a shot, you know. This was the type of team that we had, you know. It was a good team. It was a team that didn't take much of nothing. We played hard, we played tough. We played physical. We were physical because we lost to North Texas State here at the Roundhouse. That was the worst thing in the world that could have happened to us. You know, they were last in the Missouri Valley. We played them guys up here. They beat us. Ralph said, well, that won't happen again. We got tough. We got really physically tough. You know, we went down to Oklahoma City tournament a week, I think it was a week later. It wasn't even a contest. We played 3 games down there. It wasn't even a contest in all 3 games.
And they bought big trophies because Oklahoma City was going to win the tournament, and we all got one, right? Yeah, they had these big clock trophies because they had this fantastic team, and I think we beat them by 30 or something. You know, they were embarrassed.
Charlie, big game Hunter.
Yeah.
Basket by Charlie, big game Hunter.
Yeah.
And we ate their lunch.
When it was over. So.
Maybe one more? Ted?
First of all, I want to thank you all for taking the time to share these wonderful memories with us all. And thank you for what you mean to Wichita State University. It also occurs to me that you were the first team to carry the banner of Wichita State University, so you were pioneers in that regard.
Also Pioneers, it looks to me like you have a great relationship even today. But can you talk about, you were Pioneers with regard to the black and white players on the team. What was that like? And how did you come together so wonderfully?
I have looked at that several times, to be honest with you. It was a great sociological change going on in the world of athletics. I think that's one reason we were very successful. Ralph, again, was a pioneer, and he recruited black players. I read an old article in a Sports Illustrated from 1964-65. It was quoting some Big 8 coaches who said that the Missouri Valley was the valley of death, but they didn't have quite the academic standards to live with that the rest of us had to, insinuating that, and it also went on and said, good basketball players are dumb people, okay? Ralph was an originator. There was no color in our team. I mean, I speak that from my heart. I know they do too. I know how they felt. One time we went to Dave's high school, and you remember this, guys, to practice. We were playing in North Texas State or someplace in Dallas, and they let Dave's high school out to watch us practice. It was in the afternoon. Guess what? There's 7 white people in the whole building. Am I correct? Okay. Now I know how Dave feels playing in front of 10,000 people, or Kelly, okay? There's 7 black people on our team, or whatever the number was, I don't know. So it was an experience for us, okay? We were ahead of the circle, or whatever, the curve. But we saw no color. Dave got married, and I remember his in-laws had a dinner for us in Peoria. All of us, not just the black players, all of us went to his in-laws' house for dinner. They had black girls, and they had black people, but we were accepted as just part of the team. So we did not have any of that problem. I think we were maybe ahead of that. That revolution maybe came later, and I'm not being critical of anybody. It was a big sociological change going on in the world. But I mean, Dave was talking a while ago, we played for the university, we played for our teammates, okay, as well. I said in the beginning, if you want to play with Dave, you got to keep up with Dave, okay? And he made us all good. Not that we weren't good basketball players, he made us all great, I'll just say that. And I might just say, and I don't know how close you are to wrapping this up, but I appreciate you inviting myself down to be part of this. And I'm not going to give you a pep talk, you guys that are on the team now, but you have a great opportunity ahead of you. We didn't know what we were playing for when we went to the Final Four. If I'd have known it was going to be this big 50 years later, I might have been a little better player. But I mean, I'm also pleased that nobody raised their hand and said they didn't recognize me with my clothes on. I mean, that's usually the story. I used to get, I didn't recognize you with your clothes on, meaning, I knew you when you played in your uniform. But you have a great opportunity ahead of you, and I would just, I know you put forth the greatest effort you can, but every year, the further I get away from 1965, the better I get. I mean, I really wasn't as good as they said I was, but I get better. But cherish the moment and give it your utmost 100% effort. I know you do. But it's something you'll live forever, the experience you're going through now. I mean, that's, like I said, Kelly and I played against each other and Jamie for 5-6 years. And then we were teammates for 4 more years. And it's just a bonding that's there. I mean, I asked about his dad this morning. I know his dad well. He always showed up in bib overalls, but that's the camaraderie we had. We could tell stories up here if you had all morning on each other. I mean, that's why I don't know how deep you want to go, but,
I think we're good when it comes to clothes on and off.
Okay, that's about right. Okay.
Actually, there's a young lady, an older lady up back in the back that raised her hand when you said that.
All right, but anyhow, thank you again for having us. It was my pleasure. I know everybody else, but Mike, thanks.
Thank you all for coming, and I'm sure these guys will be glad to chat with you if you have some unanswered questions or whatever. But thanks again very much.